This video is brought to you by the Spider Combat Arena. Support the Kickstarter today.
What's up, guys? Today we are going to be talking about texture in animation. No, not that texture. I'm not talking about Substance Painter texture. I'm not talking about texturing in Maya. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? I'm not talking about poly paint and ZBrush. Stay focused. I am talking about texturing in animation. The sense, what does that mean exactly? Because I know many of you guys, especially if you're new to animation, have probably heard, hey, you need to add a little texture to your animation. Hey, just add a little texture here and there. For my understanding, okay, in my professional years of being an animator, I'm gonna try and give a loose definition of how I interpret texture. Because you'll have an animation director add a little bit of texture, to that move, blah, blah, blah. How I see it is variations in movements that break up the monotony of an action in an organic way. Okay, I know that was a mouthful.
That's what she said.
So back in the day, when you had a whole bunch of CG animation, it was quite obvious it was CG animation. Why? Because everything was so polished, everything was so refined, everything was just blemish-free. That's how you knew it was CG animation, because it was like, okay, you had this whole world in front of you that had mud, dirt, scratches, lint, hair, leaves, all this, right? All this atmosphere on people's clothes, on the ground, on reflections, right? The reflections were muddy in some cases. And you had CG that would stick out like a sore thumb, right? It was perfectly modeled. There was no, indent or any problems with the model. There were the reflections were perfect, right? Perfect. No scratches, no blemishes, and it would just stick out as fake. Because as we know, animation isn't, a perfect sphere, isn't a perfect arc. It isn't, once you start to study arcs and you look at actual real life, real life footage, you realize that not everything's a perfect arc as, the principles.
You're lying, I'm Spider-Man.
You're a mistake!
And I'll do a video on this when it comes to breaking the principles. Because listen, here's the thing. As Arnold says, what does he say? Break the rules, not the law. So when it comes to breaking the principles of animation, that's when some real fun stuff happens. But you have to free your mind.
Free your mind.
So when it comes to animation and applying texture in your animation, that's what I get from it, is hey, don't make your animation so pristine. Don't make it so overly polished that it comes off as CGI, unless that's what you're trying to go for, right? If you're trying to go for this robot that is, flawless and has perfect, ching movements, fine. Obviously, you're not gonna have him, have a clink or an arm or something like that. You wanna stay true to the character. So, texture, obviously, is going to be subjective to the character, what type of texture that you apply on. Now, there's some texture, I believe, that is universal. It's universal, you're gonna have it no matter what. And for example, some of the best texture that you can apply is in your body mechanics work. You don't understand. If you've ever applied for a job or if you've ever been on the hiring process, there's nothing worse than seeing a whole bunch of animations or a body mechanic shot that is just flawless, right? It reminds me back into, because usually every animator taking like a cinema course to understand, cinematography, to understand, the hero's journey. That's usually a basic understanding in many animator circles. So one thing they talk about in building a hero, a protagonist, is that, let the protagonist lose, right? Let the protagonist get dirty. Let him get a scratch. Let him, get a busted shoulder. Let him get shot. Hurt the protagonist. Don't allow the protagonist to feel like this this perfect, flawless being. Let them, and if they are this perfect, flawless being, for example, let's say Dr. Manhattan, allow him to be hurt in other ways. Allow him to be hurt with this disconnect from the human experience. Allow that isolation, right? Because there are other ways to hurt the protagonist. So allow that to happen. And that principle right there, I would argue, is texture in a nutshell when it comes to your animation. And going back to the body mechanic shot, as I was saying, is when you're having a body mechanic shot, right? Where they're going through this obstacle course and they're running and everything, but they're doing it all perfectly, right? They're perfect jump, bam, perfect land, perfect wall run, perfect dodge, perfect slide, everything. So how do you break up a shot like that? How do you apply some texture? Well, you add some realism into it, right? You add some, hey, the character isn't perfect. So one way you can separate, a noob animator reel from a more experienced animator reel is that texture. So when the person grabs, maybe, they slip when they land, and they have to recatch their balance. That really shows your understanding of the principles, because one way to show someone can actually, has a control of their body, right, is to make their floor uneven. So now they have to really control their body. If you push someone, they have to regain balance. That is a very difficult thing to animate, because you have to know, as far as the center of gravity, you have to know where the weight is on every single step, why that is happening, the physics of that happening, the overlap, the delay, the drag, all of that. I believe Milk Khan said the way he animated Shere Khan was that he knew where the weight was on every single step that was placed. So when you have a shot like that where you're jumping, and you slide or you're running, what happens if you slip, right? Because if you're trying to accelerate, depending on how fast you're going, sometimes, the surface could be a non-stick, a non-slip area, absolutely. But where's the texture in that, right? Once again, break away from the CGI, hurt the protagonist, show that, the person it has human qualities, something that we can relate to, because that's one of the biggest points in animation is relatability, right? And many of the characters and the superheroes and the individuals that we see and we look up to or we enjoy as entertainment that resonate with us, there's some type of something that we see in that character, something that resonates with us. We're like, okay, I get, he tripped like me, or he made a bad mistake like me. Oh, I do that, right? So when you have that in animation, when the person, stumbles or something and then regains their balance or something like that, or let's say they miss it the first time. They actually started doing this in games where it's like a false leap, where like Uncharted does this amazing. Well, you'll jump and you'll grab onto it, but then it'll break or it'll fall upon you, and then you scramble to grab again. Those moments, I know for me, are like, whoa, right? Because you're so used to, climb. That moment where you actually climb and you grab and you miss, and it's like, whoa, did I do that? Is it the game? What's happening? Or am I about to die? It's like a shock of adrenaline, and it keeps you in the game. So I would suggest add those little shocks in your animation.
I taught him how to do that, so I gotta be a pretty good mentor to pull that off.
One example is a reload. So I was doing a reload animation. It was for an animation. It was for an animation job, and I remember one of the notes I got was, have him miss the first time. I was like, what? I was like, that's more animation. For me, I'm thinking to myself, why would I do that? It's more animation. Now I have to have him miss, realign. Now I have to do the camera of the camera. It was a first person. I'm thinking this is a whole bunch of work, but what they were getting at was texture, essentially, right? Because no one gets it the first time. And even if they do, say they're a flawless being, they get it the first time. What fun is that? Is that entertaining to watch? Because what you want to do in your animation is entertain. Once again, we go back to resonating. Not everyone's perfect like that, unless your character is in fact perfect. Then it goes to, well, what are some other ways to branch out and show their humanity? What are some other ways that this character can resonate with the audience or the player? So I had to, I fixed the animation, right? I had to miss the first time and then, bam, slam it in.
That's what she said.
But there was some character in that, because him missing the first time, it kind of showed, or that's what I was aiming for, related to the player, related to the animation director, that he's used to getting it in all the time, right? Pause. He's used to, and when he misses, right, bam, he gets a little frustrated. He's a little frustrated, kind of a little quick-tempered, especially in the heat of the battle. So bam, he jams it in and, gets back, and goes into the idle. I think that adding texture into a lot of your animations will really separate you, from the rest of the pack. And that's really what you want to do, especially in this competitive environment, which is animation. Especially when you got AI right sniffing down your back, you have to separate yourself from the rest. Another example, once again, would be grabs. You know how many times I've seen people do grabs in animation, or they're pushing off, and it's just a perfect push off. What happens if he loses his balance while he's pushing off, or while he's grabbing onto something and he has to replace it. Once again, it's called IK hands, right? When you have a hand and it just stands there and everything, you have to add a little texture to the hand where he has to readjust, right? Readjust. When you're climbing a rock, it's not so much as, bam. You usually have to readjust depending on where you are. Now, that's obviously different when it comes to video game animation, but when it comes to your reels and stuff like that, if you can do it, add it, right? Add that in there to let people know, okay, he gets it. He understands. That's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, guys, keep animating.